Let there be light. Amazing how that worked. Have a great lighting team up there. A big round of applause to them. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. We are excited to perform for you. These guys have been working a long time and have been working their hardest, and I hope that they really just give you a great story. My name is Mike Gosshorn. I happen to be the president of Goose Creek Players and the director for this production. We really appreciate you coming out here tonight. If you like the show, there's one more after this. Tomorrow I'll have a matinee, so tell your friends if you like it. If you don't like it, tell your enemies. Remember to keep your ticket stubs. If you like to go to Sweet Frog, if you go over to Sweet Frog here in Percival by tomorrow, you can get 20% off of the Sweet Frog order, so that's good to know. Next season, the Goose Creek Players is proud to announce that in the December, we are doing It's a Wonderful Life. We're not doing it here. We're going to do the smaller theater called Trillium, which is in Lincoln, but it's a beautiful little theater and wonderful to do. And for the spring, we're actually going to do it here. In April of next year, we're going to do Agatha Christie's, and then there were none. In the event of an emergency, you can see where the exit signs are. And if there's a serious emergency, the Franklin Park staff will come out and guide us. Please, no food or drink in the auditorium. Appreciate it. We're trying to keep this beautiful setting as pristine as possible. At this time, are there any doctors in this house? Then we have no reason for anybody to have their phone on, or at least not on airplane mode. So mine goes too. It's debatable about whether or not cell phones interfere with the microphones. They probably don't, but let me tell you why you should put your phone on airplane mode. Many years ago, I was in a theater in Washington, D.C., and I decided, it'll be fine. I'll just put my phone on silent. It'll be okay. I don't think it was 10 minutes into the production when an Amber Alert went off. Doesn't matter if your phone is on silent or not. When an Amber Alert goes off, your phone goes off. Everybody's looking at me. Ask your mom. So anyway, yeah, don't be that person everybody looks at in case an Amber Alert or a weather storm goes off. So appreciate it. You are allowed to take pictures and video of this production. There are no license restrictions to it. However, we ask you to be polite to your neighbors, so no flash. And also ask that you not be playing Fortnite while you're sitting here. And don't feed those electronic pets. They'll be okay for a few hours, all right? So, I'd like to make the following recognitions. First of all, my costumer, Lydia, who's not here tonight, but she did a wonderful job. I really appreciate all she did. You'll see a lot of beautiful costumes here tonight. But in addition, she couldn't do all the costumes, so we had to borrow a few. So I want to give praise to Sterling Playmakers for letting us borrow those costumes. And all the mics that we have here tonight, we also borrowed because Goose Creek Players, this is our first season. So we had to borrow mics, and so we also borrowed some mics from Sterling Playmakers and some from Potomac Falls High School. So I'm very grateful that they let us borrow their equipment this week. Please, if there's something goes wrong with them, don't blame me. Just kidding. It'll be fine. I also like to thank my wife, who's been very, very kind and very supportive of me, and let me borrow some of the furniture. And last, I'm really appreciative of Loudoun government allowing this building, Franklin Park Arts Center, to be built many, many years ago, and for people to come and rent it. And I'm very, very grateful for the support of staff, especially Joey, Les, Elizabeth, and Richard, who have just been wonderful, plus the volunteer ushers that they give us. It's just amazing. So it really is a great find, and really continue to support Franklin Park Arts Center because it's just amazing to be able to be here. So the show will be in two parts, 90 minutes for the first half. 90 minutes, you say I didn't get any coffee or caffeine, what am I going to do? It's Jane Austen, guys, I can't do the show in, an hour. It's a long show. 90 minutes for the first part, a quick 15-minute intermission, and the last part's only about 55 minutes. So it'll be pretty quick. So make sure you stick around, spoiler alert, to see the proposals at the end. I'm supposed to tell you that. You already know. That's why you're here. You guys are Jane Austen fans. So anyways, let me get started here. So, as it was billions of years ago when mankind first started, they stood up in front of the light and started to tell their story of the great hunt they had that day, or make up a new story to entrance the audience. I would like to start my spell now. In the words of Jane Austen, the opening sentence of Pride and Prejudice, "'Tis a truth universally acknowledged, that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife." Sit back and relax as Goose Creek Players proudly presents Pride and Prejudice.
Hold this piece while I snip it off, Kitty.
Why did you buy the bonnet, Lydia, if you don't think it pretty?
Law, I thought I might as well as not. I shall pull it to pieces and see if I can make it any better.
There are 2 or 3 much uglier in the shop. One of my most sensible extracts says, "Beauty's often the eyes of the beholder." I considered that with pondering. When Lydia and I prefer pondering to enjoying ourselves, Mary, we will think about it.
I think it'll be very tolerable when I trim it with some prettier coloured satin.
I think you just wanted another bandbox.
Law, what if I did?
Oh, Mr. Bennet, did you hear the news? Netherfield Ball has been let at last.
Is it?
Oh, Mrs. Longish has been here to tell me all about it. Well, don't you want to know who has taken it?
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
A young man of great fortune from the north of England.
What's his name?
Bingley.
Is he married or single?
Single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune. 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls.
Mamma, Kitty and I have already heard your news from Aunt Phillips at Meryton.
A man must wear uniform or else we can't see him at all.
I remember when I liked a red coat myself.
At heart, you still do, my dear.
If a smart young colonel of 5,000 or 6,000 a year would want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him.
Lydia considers Mr. Wickham the most elegant of the officers in Meryton, though I doubt if he has a private fortune.
Do you think I'd ask him about a thing like that? Besides, he is as I and my sister Elizabeth.
Are you going to finish this upstairs?
Yes, do you bring the satin with you?
Mary, what I have to discuss with your father will be of more interest to your elder sisters.
Then I shall retire to my room for a little further study.
Now, my dear, what does Mr. Bingley's fortune have to do with Jane and Elizabeth?
Well, how can you be so tiresome, Mr. Bennet? You must know I'm thinking of marrying one of them.
But, Mamma, we have not even met the gentleman.
Oh, but it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of you.
Is that his reason for settling here?
Oh, you must call on him at once.
You and the girls may go. You are as handsome as any of them, and Mr. Bingley may like you the best of the party.
My dear, you flatter me. Certainly I've had my share of beauty, but I do not claim to be extraordinary, now that I have 5 grown-up daughters.
What a fine walk I've had. Now, Jane, you should have come with me.
She had her needlework to finish.
Elizabeth, Mamma has just been telling us that Netherfield is let.
Sir Charlotte Lucas told me this morning.
And you didn't confide in your own mother?
Sir William Lucas and Lady Lucas have already called on Mr. Bingley. Charlotte says he is very pleasing manners.
What did you hear about Mr. Bennet? Consider your daughters. Will not be on visiting, you do not?
I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you. I'll send a few lines by you, assuring him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of my daughters.
Now, Papa. Will you come with me to my room, Jane? Mamma may feel she can talk more freely in our absence.
What did he say in a few minutes, Lizzie?
Yes, Mamma.
Mr. Bennet, I insist that you visit Mr. Bingley at once. Just think of an establishment it will be for one of your daughters.
Oh, I should put in a good word by little Lizzie.
I do no such
mistake me, my dear. I have a high regard for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you talk about them in consideration these 20 years.
You do not know what I suffer.
But you will get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year move into the neighborhood. I wish to reign undisturbed in the library.
Lady Lucas and Miss Charlotte Lucas, madam.
Show them in, Hill. And tell Miss Jane and Miss Elizabeth that we have guests.
Yes, madam.
Good afternoon, Lady Lucas. How well you are looking, Charlotte.
We have but a short time to stay.
Oh, don't say that when I've been looking forward to such a nice long chat.
I thought you'd be interested to know that we have called at Netherfield, and our call has been returned.
Oh, so soon. How agreeable of him.
I had hoped to see Elizabeth. Miss Jane and Miss Elizabeth are coming downstairs.
Good day, Lady Lucas. Charlotte, I'm glad you came. And I.
How nice to see you, Lady Lucas.
We're on our way to make other calls, my dear. Did Charlotte tell you that she has met Mr. Bingley?
Yes, and that he asked her for the honour of the first dance when he gives his ball at Netherfield.
How nice for you, Charlotte.
It is only a gesture of politeness. He has not yet seen you, Jane.
I am most distressed that Mr. Bennet has not visited Mr. Bingley yet. A most pleasing young man, I hear.
Oh, very agreeable. His sister, Miss Bingley, who was to keep house for him, is a very fine lady, used to London society.
It will be pleasant to have her in the neighbourhood. He has a friend visiting him too, a Mr. Darcy.
Oh, another young man.
Reported to have an income of £10,000 a year.
£10,000?
I thought him handsome, but with proud and disagreeable manners.
Doesn't Mr. Bennet call?
Do not distress yourself, Mamma. No doubt we shall meet him at the assemblies.
I must prevail upon Mr. Bennet to call Mr. Bingley immediately.
Indeed, you must. Come, Charlotte, let's be on our way.
Perhaps we can have another ball walks tomorrow morning. I shall be looking forward to it.
It's been a delightful chat. Good afternoon, ladies.
Afternoon.
So distressed by your father's conduct, Charlotte Lucas will have a husband before any of you.
Charlotte is our very good friend, and we wish her well.
Lady Lucas is a selfish, designing woman who called upon me but to gloat. I have no doubt that she schemes to marry Charlotte to Mr. Bingley.
You're quite mistaken, Mamma. Charlotte has a mind of her own, and so no doubt has the young man.
Why does your father vex me like this?
I hope, my dear, that you have ordered a good dinner for today, for I have reason to expect an addition to our family party.
Oh, what do you mean? And thus, Lizzie, did you invite Charlotte?
No, Mamma.
The person of whom I speak is a gentleman and a stranger.
It is Mr. Bingley! You have called on him! Oh, how unlucky! We do not have a bit of fish, Jane! Please summon him this moment!
It is not Mr. Bingley. It is a person I have never seen before.
If you've never seen him, how do you know he's coming?
Your father speaks in riddles purposely to vex my poor nerves!
You will observe, my dear, that I have a letter.
I did not know you had a letter.
You know, it came a fortnight ago, but I have not had a chance to tell you about it. It is, he's already answered, and he's going to come and stay for a fortnight himself. It's from my cousin, Mr. Collins.
That earnest man, Mr. Collins, indeed! Oh, can he wait until you're dead to turn us all out of this house?
My dear, there is nothing we can do to prevent Mr. Collins from inheriting Longbourn once I die.
I do think it's the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be tailed away from your own children.
It is the law, Mamma.
I can't bear to think of it.
But when you hear what he has to say, you may be a little softened toward him.
I'm sure I shall not. I think it was impertinent of him to write to you at all.
Well, for one thing, he says that he has received his ordination.
Oh, a clergyman.
And that he's been appointed to a rectory by the patronage of the Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Whoever she may be.
Well, at any rate, he is coming here today for a fortnight's visit.
Am I supposed to make him
judge for yourself by this line. I cannot be otherwise concerned at being the means of injuring your amiable daughters.
I'm glad he realizes it.
And beg leave to apologize for it, as well as to assure you of my readiness to make every possible amends.
If he should want to make amends, I will not be the person to discourage him.
I'm impatient to see him.
I'm impatient to see Mr. Bingley. Why must you remain so stubborn on this matter?
If it will relieve your nerves, my dear, I have already called on the young gentleman.
Oh, Papa, you have.
Oh, good idea.
Thank you, my dear.
This is Papa's idea of a good joke on us all.
To call and never say a word about it till now.
And let Mamma tell him all about Mr. Bingley.
Lady Lucas will soon see that Charlotte sort of wit above my own girls.
Oh, Mamma, what do you think? We saw it from our window upstairs.
What are they talking about?
The carriage from Netherfield.
Oh, it's stopping up front.
A young gentleman is getting out. It must be Mr. Bingley.
Oh, and he's wearing a fine blue coat.
Another young gentleman is coming with him, and a young lady too.
Don't you hear?
Yes, Mamma. Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley, and Mr. Darcy.
Show them in.
It's in order to at once, Hill, and tell Miss Mary to come down immediately.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary makes such a good impression on visitors. She's so very intelligent. Oh, Jane, you must be composed as I am. Oh, Lydia, can you mind your manners and tone down your voices? James, you don't need a word. Men admire an accomplished young woman. Lizzie, watch your short tongue.
Yes, Mama.
Well, madam, I believe your family is under control for the time being.
Mrs. Bingley, Mr. Bingley, and Mr. Darcy.
Good afternoon, sir. May I present my wife and my daughters, Miss Jane, Miss Elizabeth, Miss Catherine, and Miss Lydia.
It is a great pleasure. Let me present my sister, Miss Bingley, who's desired to meet your acquaintance.
I'm delighted, Miss Bingley.
And my friend, Mr. Darcy.
Pray be seated. We should have tea in a moment.
Thank you.
Well, I trust you are well settled at Netherfield by now.
Yes, thanks to the excellent management of my sister, I look forward to a pleasant stay.
Oh, I don't know a place in the county that is the equal of Netherfield. I hope you will think of quitting in a hurry.
Whatever my brother does is done in a hurry.
If I should resolve to quit Netherfield, I should probably be off in 5 minutes. At present, however, I find the surroundings to be quite charming.
I can't define the country. One moves in such limited society.
But people themselves alter so much that there is something new to be observed in them forever.
Well, I do not see that London has such an advantage over the country except the shops. The country is a great deal pleasanter. Is it not, Mr. Bingley?
When I'm in the country, I never wish to leave it.
The Winniest town is pretty much the same.
I can be equally happy in either.
That is because you have the right disposition. But this gentleman seems to think that the country is nothing at all.
Indeed, Mamma, you quite mistook Mr. Darcy. He only meant that there was not such a variety of people to be met with in the country as in town.
But I know that we dine with 4 and 20 families.
Did you know the officers are stationed at Meryton, Mr. Bingley? Oh, what fun we have with them.
You know how a young girl likes a red coat. I was once that way myself.
Indeed.
I understand you have become acquainted with Miss Lucas.
Yes, I have called upon the family.
Oh, Charlotte is our dear friend.
Oh, Sir William is such an agreeable man, such the man of fashion, so genteel, so easy.
Oh, he, certainly is.
He has always something to say to everybody. That is my idea of good breeding. And those who fancy themselves quite important and never open their mouths quite mistake the matter.
Charlotte just called on us this morning, and you just missed her.
Oh, a very good sort of girl. What a pity she is not very handsome. Not that I consider her to be very plain.
She seems a very pleasant young woman.
Oh, yes, indeed. But you must own she's very plain.
My dear, surely you can think of a different subject to talk to our guests about.
But Lady Lucas has often said so herself and envied my teachings.
Oh, Mamma.
Was I not one to boast of my own child, but Jane, to be sure, one doesn't often find anyone better looking. It is what everybody says.
They are quite right.
My third daughter will be down presently. Mary's the clever one. Always reading and making extracts as well as constantly practicing on the piano.
What fine weather we are having, Miss Bingley.
I find it still a little cold.
Maybe you're...
Part of my purpose in calling here today was to invite you all to a ball at Netherfield. It is to be a fortnight from now.
Oh, Kitty, did you hear that? I do hope you'll invite some of the officers.
If it will please you. Miss Lucas has promised me the first dance. Would you do me the honor in promising me the second?
Thank you, I will.
Dancing is such a charming amusement for young people, isn't it, Mr. Darcy?
Yes, and it has the advantage of being in vogue everywhere. Every savage can dance.
Her daughter, Miss Mary, Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley, Mr. Darcy.
Jane, my love, tea for Mary.
I'm sorry I wasn't present when you called. I had been reading.
Indeed.
One finds such comfort in a good bottle of sensible thoughts.
Mary is the clever one.
What a delightful library you have at Pemberley.
It has been the work of many generations.
Elizabeth, too, is fond of reading. You should have a great deal in common.
I am sure we never read the same books, nor with the same feeling.
If you will excuse us now. You spoke of how to write a letter to your sister.
Yes.
Miss Darcy's such a dear girl. We all think the world of her. Do we not, Charles?
Yes, I'm sure we'll like it here.
I said you think the world of Miss Darcy, Charles.
Of course, a nice child.
Well, I hope we shall see you again soon.
To the ball, you won't forget.
Be sure you don't forget.
I'm certain that I shall not.
You have given them a topic of conversation for some days to come.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wickham.
Dear Kitty, Mr. Wickham's calling. So many calls we have this afternoon. Show him in here. I do hope the next time you visit we'll take a turn to our garden. It is small perhaps, but our friends find it quite delightful.
Yes, I'm sure it is.
Mr. Wickham.
Oh, Mr. Wickham, have you met our guests, Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy?
We bid you good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon.
Mr. Wickham, I will leave you to the tender graces of the ladies while I retire to the library.
I am charmed, I assure you.
I shall continue with my extracts.
I have called with an invitation from your sister, Mrs. Phillips.
Oh, how nice of you.
She would be pleased to have your daughters at her home for dinner tonight, and perhaps a game of lottery tickets afterward.
Oh, Mamma, say we may go.
Please, all the officers will be there this evening.
We ourselves are the guests, but then your father's cousin, Mr. Burns.
Oh, but he won't come to us.
We should be here to greet him.
But Miss Elizabeth, I wish especially that you should attend.
Thank you, sir, but I think not.
Well, I shall go, and you may escort me there yourself.
I'll go too. Seriously, yes, Mama.
Very well, but behave yourselves and don't flirt with the officers.
Hey, Mamma, you know we don't flirt.
Get your wraps, I must see about dinner.
Just be a minute, Mr. Wickham.
Oh, I wish I had a new bonnet. What?
Mr. Wickham, don't answer if you find the question objectionable, but did Mr. Darcy acknowledge your greeting just now?
He did not.
I thought him very rude.
Perhaps we are mistaken. He seemed a polite gentleman, though rather silent.
Oh, Jane, you always seek to see the good in everyone. I thought him very disagreeable, as if it would hurt him to open his lips.
Are you much acquainted with Mr. Darcy?
As much as I ever wish to be.
I have no right to give my opinion. I've known him too long and too... well, to be a fair judge.
You have?
Well, my father was steward of Pemberley, the Darcy estate, and the present Mr. Darcy's father had a deep attachment for me.
Then, why does he ignore you?
The late Mr. Darcy was one of the best men to have ever breathed. But his son, on the other hand, is a very different sort of man.
His abominable pride is quite disgusting.
Military life is not what I was intended for. In fact, I was brought up for the church.
Indeed.
At this time, I should be in the possession of a most valuable clerical living, had it pleased the young gentleman we were speaking of just now.
Do you mean Mr. Darcy interfered?
The living was bequeathed to me by his father, but it was given elsewhere.
Good heavens! How could his will be disregarded?
Mr. Darcy chose to doubt his father's intentions.
This is shocking. He deserves to be publicly disgraced.
At some point or other he will be. But it shall not be by me. Till I can forget his great father, I can never defy nor expose him.
I'd not thought Mr. Darcy as bad as this. What could have induced him to behave so cruelly?
A thorough, determined dislike of me? A dislike I can only attribute to jealousy.
I've not ever considered that. How can Mr. Bingley be friendly with such a man? Surely there must be some mistake.
Mr. Darcy can please when he chooses. Your sympathy is very comforting to me.
What can I do but sympathize?
What do you think of my new bonnet, Mr. Wickham?
Most becoming, Miss Lydia.
Come, let us be off.
I hope to see you again soon, Miss Elizabeth. And you too, Miss Jane.
Thank you. What did you think of him, Mr. Wickham?
No.
Mr. Bingley.
What did you think of him? He couldn't take his eyes off you.
I think he's just what a young man ought to be. Sensible, good-humoured, lively, and I never saw such happy manners.
He was also handsome, as a young man ought to be.
I'm very much flattered by his asking me for a dance. I didn't expect such a compliment.
And why not?
Oh, Elizabeth.
What could be more natural than his asking you? Couldn't help seeing how pretty you are.
Dear Lizzie, but do you really think so?
You have my word. And I give you leave to like him.
If only Mamma.
I know, dear. But Mamma is as she will always be. There's no changing that.
The girls have gone?
Yes, Mamma.
What a charming young man Mr. Bingley is. Did you notice, Lizzie, how taken he was with Jane?
I noticed.
Proud Mr. Darcy paid little attention to you. But never mind how large his fortune, it is no ill luck to be disliked by him.
I agree.
Oh, he's proud, disagreeable, horrid man. I quite detest him.
Mr. William Collins, ma'am.
Oh, so soon? Show him in, Helen. Oh, fetch your father, Lizzie. Oh, my nerves survived this visit.
Mr. Collins.
Lady. Ah, good afternoon, cousin.
Your servant, sir. I hope I do not intrude upon your good lady by my visit.
Allow me to introduce my good lady and my daughter, Miss Jane.
I am honored.
Won't you be seated, Mr. Collins?
Thank you.
I trust you had a pleasant journey.
Very pleasant, thank you. I am looking forward to the pleasure of meeting your other daughters, for I've heard much of their beauty.
How nice of you to say so.
In the case of Miss Jane, fame has fallen short of the truth.
That is what everybody says, indeed.
I do not doubt that in due time all of your daughters will be well disposed in, marriage.
This is most kind of you. I wish with all my heart it to be so, for else they'll be destitute enough. Things are settled so oddly.
My dear, let's not get into that now.
You allude perhaps to the entail of this estate.
I do indeed. It is a grievous affair for our poor girls, you must confess.
Quite right, and I was
Nor
thinking.
can I find fault with you.
I am very sensible, madam, to the hardships of my fair cousins, but I can assure you that I've come to admire them. Ah, yes, and even more.
How kind of you.
Oh, our cousin, Mr. Collins. My second daughter, Miss Elizabeth.
I am delighted to make your acquaintance.
you. Mamma, shall Jane and I oblige you by making sure Mr. Collins's room is in readiness?
Oh, yes, I wish you would, my dears.
Okay.
As I said, I've come to admire them. My patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, has condescended to advise me that a young clergyman like myself needs a wife.
Oh, Mr. Collins.
And it is my hope that a mistress for my home may be found here at Longbourn.
Is that what you meant by making amends?
It is, my dear sir.
What a nice compliment to our girls, Mr. Bennet. As for my younger daughters, I can't say for sure that I'll take it upon me to say that they are not. Do they know of any prepossessions?
And as for Miss Jane?
Oh, I do think it's incumbent upon me to hint that she is likely to soon be engaged.
I see. In point of seniority, Miss Elizabeth is next.
She's quite unattached.
A very charming young woman indeed. I do not appear to be forward or precipitate, but at this time I shall say no more. But when we are better acquainted.
My dear Mr. Collins.
Since I am assured that my visit is cordial, I shall instruct your man to bring in my bags.
Did you hear that, Mr. Bennet? He wants to marry one of our girls.
I still have my hearing.
Since Mr. Bingley is so taken with Jane, Elizabeth will be the perfect choice for Mr. Collins.
Madam, you are as silly as your daughters.
I'm astonished that you would find any of your children silly. They are all of them quite clever.
You will excuse me if I defer on the three youngest.
You can't expect them to have the sense of their mother.
Oh, heaven forbid.
I can't believe it. Two of my daughters practically married.
Mr. Bingley, give me the pleasure of welcoming you to our little assembly here.
So brilliant.
I'm very glad to be here. There's nothing I love better than a country dance.
Oh, girls, Mr. Bingley's already arrived. Fix your curls, string that ribbon.
Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bingley has expressed a wish to become further acquainted with you and your daughters.
Oh, good of you, sir. Oh, yes, and you remember Jane, my eldest, and Elizabeth, Mary over here, and Kitty and Lydia, my youngest. Do you dance yourself, sir?
There's nothing I love better, madam. And if Miss Bennet is not otherwise engaged, may I be so bold as to claim the next two dances?
I am not engaged, sir.
Good.
It was a great honor, sir. The gentleman, Jane.
Mamma.
Oh, yes, and you, sir? Are you fond of dancing, too? Very welcome in Hertfordshire. I'm sure I hope you've come here as eager to dance as your friend has.
Thank you, madam. I rarely dance.
Well, let this be one of the occasions that you do, for I wager you will not find livelier music or such pretty partners.
Pray, excuse me, ma'am.
Did you ever meet such a proud, disagreeable man?
Mamma, he will hear you.
I don't care if he does and his friend is supposed to be so agreeable and everything charming. He is so far above his company.
The rich can afford to get offence wherever they go, but we need not care for his good opinion.
Indeed not.
Perhaps he isn't so very handsome after all.
Indeed not. Not quite ill-favoured, nothing like Mr. Bingley.
like Kitty and Lydia. They are so fond of dancing. I take little pleasure in a ball.
I would take more pleasure in this one if there were as many partners as agreeable as Jane's.
I believe the rewards of observation and reflection are much greater.
And so they are when there are none others to be had. We shall have to be philosophers, Mary.
Come, Darcy, I must have you dance. I must. I hate seeing you standing about in this stupid manner. Come, you'd much better dance.
I certainly shall not. In an assembly such as this, it would be insupportable. Your sister's engaged at present. You know perfectly well it would be a punishment for me to stand up with any other woman in the room.
Good Lord, Darcy, I wouldn't be as fastidious as you for a kingdom. Upon my honour, I have never met with pleasanter girls in all my life, and several of them uncommonly pretty, eh?
You've been dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
Darcy, she's the most beautiful creature I've ever beheld. Oh, but look, there's one of her sisters. She's very pretty too, I dare say. Very agreeable.
She is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Bingley, I'm in no humour to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. Go back to your partner. Enjoy her smiles. You're wasting your time with me.
And Mr. Bingley, famous Jane amongst all the other girls, we asked the next 2 dances with her.
Enough, madam, enough. For God's sake, enough about his partner. Woody had sprained his ankle on the first dance.
Oh my, and with his sister, she's so elegant and charming and everything agreeable. Oh, the lace on Miss Bingley's gown alone.
No lace, Mrs. Bennet. I beg you, no lace.
Oh, and that very broad with him, as Mr. Darcy, as he calls himself, as long as are concerned. He may be the richest man in Derbyshire, the proudest, the most disagreeable, disobliging man I've ever seen. He's like it for Lizzie, you know. I would flatly refuse to stand up to her.
Slighted my Lizzie, did he?
I didn't care for him either, Father, so it is of little concern.
Another time, Lizzie, I would not dance with him if he should ask you.
I may safely promise you, ma'am, never to dance with Mr. Darcy.
And so none of the Hertfordshire ladies could please you, Mr. Darcy? Not even famous Miss Bennet?
Oh, I've never met pleasanter people or prettier girls in all my life.
Bingley, you astonish me. I saw little beauty and no breeding at all. The eldest Miss Bennet is, I grant you, very pretty.
Yes, a fine concession. Oh, come now, admit it, she's an angel.
She smiles too much.
Well, Jane Bennet is a sweet girl. Her mother... I heard Eliza Bennet described as a famous local beauty. What do you say to that, Mr. Darcy?
I should as soon call her mother a wit.
Oh, Mr. Darcy, that's too cruel.
Darcy, I shall never understand why you go through the world determined to be displeased with everything and everyone in it.
And I will never understand why you are in such a rage to approve of everything and everyone that you meet.
Well, you shall not make me think ill of Miss Bennet, Darcy.
Indeed, he shall not. I shall dare his disapproval and declare she is a dear, sweet girl, despite her unfortunate relations, and I shall not be sorry to know her better. You see, Mr. Darcy, we are not afraid of you.
I would not have you so.
He's just what a young man ought to be, Lizzie. Sensible, good-humoured, and I never saw such a happy man.
He's also handsome, as a young man ought to be if he possibly can. And he seems to like you a great deal, which shows good judgment. No, I give you leave to like him. You'd like many a stupider person.
Dear Lizzie.
He could be happier in his choice of sister and friend, though the sister, I suppose, could not help.
Did you not like her?
Not at all. The manners are quite different from his.
At first, perhaps, but after a while I found her very pleasing. Miss Bingley is to keep house for her brother, and I'm sure they will be very charming neighbours.
One of them, maybe.
No. Lizzie, I'm sure you're wrong. And even Mr. Darcy, you know, may improve upon closer acquaintance.
Oh, do you mean he'll be in favour to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men? Oh, never. She is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt
It was
me.
very wrong of him to speak so.
Indeed it was. Capital offence. Oh, look, Charlotte is gone. Ah, Charlotte! Mary's has only placed something we could dance again. Mary, let's have no more of this dull stuff. Play something jolly, we want to dance.
But there's still 2 more movements. Mama, tell them it isn't fair.
Play a jig, Mary. Nobody wants your concertos here.
I fear their taste is not as fine as yours and mine, Mary. But let us oblige them this one time, eh? For no one here plays as well as you.
Very well, though you know it gives me little pleasure.
Jane, Mr. Bingley, come and dance with us.
Not now, Lydia.
Capital.
I see Mr. Bingley applies his attention to Jane, Lizzie.
I'm very happy for her, Charlotte.
She does seem very well pleased with him. I think if he continues so, she's in a very fair way to be very much in love with him. And Mr. Bingley, so you think he is in love?
It is clear that he likes her very much.
Then she should leave him in no doubt of her heart. She should show him more affection even than she feels, not less, if she is to secure him. Secure him, Charlotte. Oh, yes. She should secure him in as soon as may be.
Before she's even sure of his character.
Before she's even certain of her own regard for him. But of course. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance, you know. There will always be vexation and grief, and it is better to know in advance as little as possible of the defects of one's marriage partner.
Charlotte.
Is it not now?
You know it is not sound. You will never act that way yourself.
Well, it seems that Jane will not. So we must hope Mr. Bingley will. I think he gets little encouragement from his sister, or his friend. Mr. Darcy looks at you a great deal, is he? I cannot think why, unless he means to frighten me with his contempt.
I wish he would not come out into society.
He only makes people uneasy.
What a charming amusement for young people this is, Mr. Darcy. And nothing like dancing, you know, and the refinements of every polished society.
And every unpolished society. Every savage can dance.
Oh, yes, well, quite.
I think I should speak to my sister before she exposes us all to ridicule.
Capital. Miss Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner. You cannot refuse to dance, I'm sure, when so much beauty is before you.
Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. Please don't suppose that I move this way in order to beg for a partner.
I would be very happy if you would do me the honour of dancing with me, Miss Bennet.
I'm not inclined to dance.
Come, why not? When Mr. Darcy has no objection, although he dislikes the amusement so much in general.
Mr. Darcy is all politeness.
He is, and why should he not be? Considering, well, how could you object to such a fun, eh, Darcy?
I beg you would excuse me.
Well, capital.
I believe I can guess your thoughts at this moment.
I should imagine not.
You are thinking how insupportable it will be to spend many evenings in such tedious company.
No. Indeed, my mind is more agreeably engaged. I have been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Your move, Mr. Collins.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was lost in thought.
Lost. An excellent choice of words. Your move, Mr. Collins.
Aren't these flowers beautiful, Mr. Collins?
Quite possible for a small garden. My own humble abode is only separated by a lane from Lady Catherine de Bourgh's estate, where there's a veritable profusion of bloom.
I dare say Lady Catherine is a very agreeable woman.
She's thought to be proud by many, but I've only ever seen affability in her.
Your move, Mr. Collins.
I think you said she is a widow. Has she any family?
One daughter.
little girl is she? Is she handsome?
Your move, Mr. Collins.
She's a very charming young lady, but unfortunately of a sickly constitution.
Has she been presented at court?
Due to her indifferent state of health, that unhappily prevents that. As I've told Lady Catherine, the British court is deprived of its brightest ornament.
Your move, Mr. Collins.
Lady Catherine tends to agree with me.
You will notice, Mr. Collins, that I have your last king in the corner.
Ah, yes, the most trivial game.
Well, if you will excuse me, I shall retire to my library.
I thought your daughters would gather in here this morning while I read aloud from a most elevating volume. Fordyce's sermons.
Oh, how very interesting. The girls would have loved it, but they are out. And as you know, Jane is still visiting at Netherfield.
Mr. Bingley has taken quite an interest.
How glad I will be, Mr. Collins, when all my daughters are well settled.
May I perhaps speak to Miss Elizabeth this morning?
Of course. Lizzie will be most happy.
Will you let me know as soon as she arrives?
Oh, yes, I will indeed. I'll let her know as soon as she comes in. My dear!
Go away!
How can you understand my feelings, Mr. Bennet? You are not a mother!
Good afternoon, Mrs. Bennet.
How nice to see you, Charlotte.
I promised Papa I'd bake some mince pies, and nothing would do but that I try the recipe your cook uses.
Cook will be flattered. Lizzie, Mr. Collins wishes to speak to you. He's in the garden.
A little fresh air will do him good.
We insist that you see him immediately.
Yes, Mamma.
I will have cook prepare the recipe for you, Charlotte.
Oh, Charlotte, don't hurry away. I want to talk to you about the ball at Netherfield. Everyone is saying how much attention Mr. Bingley applied to Jane. It did seem as if he admired her. Is Jane happy? Very happy. But you know how she is, so composed that a man can never guess her real feelings. It is a mistake for a woman to conceal her affection with too much skill. Mr. Bingley likes your sister, undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she doesn't encourage him. But she does encourage him, as much as her nature will allow. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better show more affection than she feels. The time to fall in love is after she is sure of him. Not Jane. Her love knows no design. You didn't fare so well at the ball, Lizzie. That hateful Mr. Darcy. I overheard him talking about me. You did? Oh, Lizzie. Mr. Bingley he asked me to dance. A fine gentleman said, she is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Poor Eliza. Be only just tolerable. Indeed. If he were to like me, I should be quite put out. Hello, Mary. Reading again.
Hello, Charlotte.
In a way, Mr. Darcy's pride is understandable. A fine young man with family fortune and everything in his favour has a right to be proud. I could forgive his pride had he not mortified mine.
Pride is a very common feeling, I believe. By all that I've read, human nature is particularly prone to it. Indeed, there are few who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or other, real or imaginary.
Oh, yes, indeed. I must get the recipe before I leave.
Vanity and pride are very different things. Though the words are used synonymously, a person may be proud without being vain.
I'll see you again before I go. Please do.
Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves. Vanity to what we have others think of us.
I know, you're very clever, Mary.
The idle chatters of my younger sisters has no appeal for me.
We met Mr. Wickham in front of the library and offered to escort us home.
You can imagine how all the other girls envied us.
Oh, Lord, what fun to have everybody watching us.
I fear Miss Elizabeth does not envy you overmuch. In vain have I entreated her to take a walk with me.
Indeed, sir, I have not refused you from intent, but merely because I was occupied at the time. I am never too busy to go walking with a handsome man in a red coat.
We must tell Mamma all the news from Meryton.
Mamma does love a bit of gossip. Won't you sit down, Mr. Wickham?
Thank you. No, I must be on my way.
We missed you at the ball at Netherfield.
Unfortunately, business in the city took me away at just that time.
I understand.
Not that I have any wish to avoid Mr. Darcy. It is the other way around.
Of course. I have a mind to walk with you, since you teased me about refusing your invitation.
I shall be honoured.
We expect Jane back from Netherfield this morning, and I promised Mamma I'd speak with my cousin, Mr. Collins.
You can do that later.
Much later. You've recently been given a parish by Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and you can talk of little else.
Her daughter, Miss de Bourgh, will have a very large fortune. And it is believed that she and Mr. Darcy will marry someday.
I'm pleased to hear it. From what I have heard of Lady Catherine, a daughter of hers is not likely to make any man happy.
Not likely.
Mary's practicing again. Let's take a shortcut through the garden.
Miss Jane is back with Mr. Bingley, his sister, and Mr. Darcy.
Tell her I'll see her after the guests are gone.
Sit down, my dear Caroline. And you too. I shall let Mamma know you have been kind enough to drive me home.
Don't disturb her, she's occupied. We can't stay long.
Mamma will want to thank you for your kindness to me.
I kept messing up my life because I needed to sneeze.
Jane Bennet is a very sweet girl.
She is all of that.
I wish with all my heart that she were well settled. But with such a mother and such low connections, I'm afraid there's no chance of it.
If she had no connections, I would not think one jot less of her.
Nevertheless, how could she expect to marry a man of any consideration in the world?
You are right, Mr. Darcy. Jane was quite a success at our ball, but I observed Elizabeth Bennet was not very much of an attraction to you.
Why do you say that?
You made no effort to dance with her.
I detest dancing.
Why so thoughtful, Mr. Darcy?
No reason at all.
This must be serious.
I was thinking of the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Oh, Mr. Darcy, what lady has the credit of inspiring such reflections?
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
I am astonished. When am I to wish you joy?
A lady's imagination is wondrous. It jumps from admiration to love, and from love to matrimony in a moment.
You would have a charming mother-in-law.
You know I'm not serious.
I hope you give your mother-in-law a few hints as to the advantage of holding her tongue, and if you can, cure the younger ones of running after the officers. Oh, which one is responsible for that?
I couldn't say.
My dear Miss Bingley, my dear sirs, how kind you've been to Jane.
The kindness is on Miss Jane's side.
We have found her very pleasant company.
Thank you.
Are you ready to return now, Charles?
So soon?
Oh, Jane, my love, didn't Mr. Bingley once express a wish to share a garden?
But, Mamma...
I did, madam. Will you show it to me, Miss Jane?
Of course she will. Miss Bingley, Mr. Darcy and I have a nice little trot.
Oh, not again. Mind if I see the garden too?
Oh, not at all. And you, Mr. Darcy?
Thank you, I shall remain here.
Wait for me, Charles.
You are very fond of reading, Mr. Darcy.
Yes, madam.
Quite a pleasant day, isn't it?
It was.
Will you be remaining long at Netherfield?
I cannot say.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I'll leave you to your reading.
Certainly, madam.
Good morning, Mr. Darcy.
Good morning, Miss Elizabeth. We have brought Miss Jane home.
I've just seen her. I'm sure Jane had a most delightful time.
Quite.
It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. You might make some remark about the weather.
Consider it made.
One must speak a little, you know.
In some cases, the less said, the better.
Nevertheless, I shall introduce the next topic of conversation. I've just had a short walk with a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham has a way of making friends. Whether he may be equally capable of retaining them is less certain.
He's been so unlucky as to lose your friendship, and through no fault of his own.
Miss Bennet, do not judge my character when you know so little about me.
I have seen and heard enough.
All my life I have tried to avoid weakness of any kind.
Such as vanity and pride.
Vanity is a weakness indeed. Pride, that is a different matter.
I suppose you never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice.
I hope not. Do you, Miss Elizabeth?
I? Certainly not.
Then let us drop the subject for the moment.
If I'm ever to get the mince pies baked, I really must be on my way.
Miss Lucas?
How nice to see you again, Mr. Darcy.
Charles is going home to do some baking. Of course, my girls are never allowed in the kitchen, but I'm sure your dear mother knows what's best for you, Charlotte.
Charlotte is very clever, and I envy her. Thank you, dear Lizzie. Good afternoon, Mrs. Bennet. And you, Mr. Darcy.
Elizabeth has such a sympathetic nature.
Delightful garden.
It's small, but we enjoy it.
I'm so sorry we must leave so soon.
We hope you will come again.
Thank you.
You may depend on it.
Jane so enjoyed her visit.
I enjoyed having her.
Thank you again.
Jane, the way he smiled at you.
Mamma.
Oh, come. You may tell Mamma all about it. Lizzie, have you spoken to Mr. Collins yet?
Not yet.
Well, you must do so at once.
Oh, Mama, I don't think that's a good idea.
You do need to talk to him as soon as... He's out in the garden, I believe, waiting.
Oh,
I've left him waiting all this time. It is very important.
Well, he can wait a little longer. You know, I think I want to talk to Mr. Collins. Wait, how do you want to talk to Mr. Collins?
No, he must speak to Lizzie.
We can all talk together, maybe.
Jane, I insist that Lizzie stay.
I've been waiting, but I fear, Mrs. Bennet, that you have forgotten my request.
Oh, I did not. I was just this minute reminding her that you wish to speak to her. Come, Jane.
Oh, please don't go. I beg you, Mr. Collins must excuse me, but he can have nothing to say to me that anybody need not hear.
Nonsense, Lizzie. Stay right where you are.
Please, Mama.
Such modesty.
Oh, no. I insist that you stay and hear what Mr. Collins has to say. Come now, Jane.
Believe me, my dear Miss Elizabeth, your modesty adds to your other perfections. You would have been less amiable in my eyes had there not been this little unwillingness.
Oh!
I do have your dear respected mother's permission for this dress.
You have.
Almost as soon as I entered this house, I had selected you as the woman of my future life. But before I let my heart run away with me, let me state the reasons for coming here expressly to select a wife. First, it is the right thing for clergymen to set the example of matrimony in this parish. Secondly, that it will greatly increase my happiness. And thirdly, that it is the particular advice and recommendation of my patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who twice has condescended to give me her opinion, unasked. She believes the wife I choose should be a gentle, useful sort of person, not brought up high, but able to make a small income go a long ways. I'm well aware that £1,000 before percent is all that will be yours when your mother passes, but I assure you, I will not reproach you on that score. And now, nothing remains for me but to show you the balance of my affections.
Oh, sir, you are too hasty. I thank you for your generous offer, but I must decline it.
Come, I know it is usual for a young woman to act embarrassed and unwilling, while all the while their heart is fluttering with wild panic.
Upon my word, sir, you are a hard man to discourage.
I shall lead you to the altar ere long.
But I'm perfectly serious in my refusal. You could not make me happy, and I am convinced I am the last woman in the world who can make you so.
Oh, Miss Elizabeth.
Were your friend Lady Catherine to know me, I am sure she would find me in every respect unqualified for the situation.
Ah, I see. You wish to increase my love by suspense. But I beg of you, hold me off no longer. Confess your love for me.
Really, Mr. Collins, can I speak plainer? I am no elegant female out to plague you. I am a rational creature, speaking the truth from my heart.
You are charming, Miss Elizabeth. Those adorable creatures be mine.
Please, Mr. Collins, you are mad. Quite mad.
Miss Elizabeth.
Oh, congratulations to you, happiness, my dear Mr. Collins, and my sweet Lizzie.
Spare us your congratulations, Mother. I refuse Mr. Collins' generous offer.
Come back at once, Lizzie. Depend on it, she shall be brought to reason.
She seems rather definite.
She is a very headstrong, foolish girl.
Headstrong? Foolish?
Well, she gets that from her father, but let me bring that stubborn girl to reason.
Stubborn, too. Perhaps if she has deficits of temper, that it might be best not to force her into accepting me.
Oh, no, you quite mistake me in the matter. She is only headstrong in such matters as these. In everything else, she is as sweet-natured a girl as ever lived.
Perhaps some other time, my dear Mrs. Bennet.
Oh, Mr. Bennet! Mr. Bennet!
What now?
Oh, we're in an uproar! You must make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins!
What are you talking about?
Mr. Collins declares that he will not have Lizzie, and Lizzie declares she will have Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie. It is such a mess!
Where is Elizabeth?
In the garden!
Elizabeth, come here directly.
Tell her that you insist upon her marrying him.
Yes, Father?
I understand Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage.
He has.
Well, I insist upon her accepting it, or I shall never see her again.
An unhappy alternative lies before you, Elizabeth. From this day on, you may never see one of your parents again. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins. And I will never see you again if you do.
I tell you, Mary, nobody takes my part.
Yes, Mama.
I am cruelly used. Nobody feels my poor nerves.
Yes, Mama. I mean, no, Mama.
I thought at least you would understand my feelings.
Yes, Mama.
Mr. Collins has been acting so strange since he returned from Lady Lucas's. I fear that Charlotte has set her cap for him.
Charlotte's not artful.
She is 27, and I'm sure quite desperate. My own daughters don't appreciate my efforts. There she is now, looking as unconcerned as ever.
Please, Mamma, don't continue to plague Lizzie.
I tell you, Miss Lizzie, if you take it in your head to go on refusing every offer of marriage in this way, you shall not have a husband.
Do I seem worried?
I won't be able to keep you when your father is dead.
Don't you think you have talked about it enough? If Lizzie doesn't care for Mr. Collins, then that is the end of it.
Shall I speak of it again?
Good.
But if Charlotte Lucas marries Mr. Collins, I won't be able to keep any of you when your father dies.
Please, Mamma.
Oh, at least I can console myself that you
Jane. Not at all.
This letter has just arrived from Netherfield.
Oh, for me?
For Miss Jane.
Thank you, Hill.
Oh, please allow, Jane. Oh, it is from Miss Bingley, I dare say, what elegant paper she uses.
It is from Miss Bingley. If you will excuse me, I shall retire to my room.
Without reading it aloud, Jane.
Is it bad news? It is surprising news.
Oh, surprise! Come tell us.
The Bingleys have taken leave of Netherfield and are on their way to town.
They've gone.
Without any intention of coming back again. Mr. Darcy has remained to close the house for his friend.
Can't believe it.
It seems to have been a very sudden decision.
We've said he makes up his mind in a hurry, but no. Jane, I do not believe it's true.
Mr. Darcy is to blame for this.
But why should he interfere?
If your nose wasn't always buried in a book, you realise how proud he is. He considers our Jane not rich, not grand enough for Mr. Bingley.
Oh, it's Mr. Darcy!
Caroline says she hopes we may meet again at some future time and regrets that they could not call the Bingley farewell.
Oh, does she?
She hints that Mr. Bingley is partial to Mr. Darcy's young sister.
I don't believe it. No one who's seen you two together can doubt his affections for you. That was Mr. Darcy's plan to wed his sister to Mr. Bingley.
Come, Jane, come to your room and let me put cold compresses on your forehead.
Please, Mamma, I'd rather be alone.
Perhaps I can console her with some of my extracts.
Mr. Darcy has to get back of this, I'll warrant.
Oh, he wouldn't dare.
He has. He and Miss Bingley between them.
Oh, Mamma! The most amazing thing!
The regiment has been ordered to Brighton.
At last, I may take a walk to Meryton without stumbling over an officer.
How can you joke about this?
Oh, my poor dear Kitty. I remember well how I cried for 2 weeks when Colonel Miller's regiment went away. Oh, my heart was broken.
How is it that you are so happy, Lydia?
She has nothing to cry about.
If only your papa would take us all to Brighton for the summer.
Papa would never allow it. Come, Lydia, out with the news you're bursting with.
Colonel Foster's wife has invited me to go with them on their visit to Brighton.
Oh, Lydia, has it really?
She said a little bit of sea air is just what I need.
It would do me a great deal of good, too.
Oh, but it was me she invited.
I can't see why Mrs. Forster shouldn't ask me as well as Lydia. I am 2 years older.
Oh, come and dry your eyes and help me pick out my new clothes. I shall need at least 2 new bonnets.
No one asked me anywhere.
Your new blue one will be perfect. Elegant with the balls and must put some more lace on it, Lydia.
What is all that to do about this time?
The regiment has been ordered to Brighton.
Oh, and Mrs. Foster's invited Lydia for a while.
I must have just yards and yards of lace.
I don't remember anyone asking my permission for this trip.
Oh, Papa, you mustn't let her go.
Oh, why not?
Mrs. Forster is so young a chaperone. There will be so many officers in Brighton.
Well, Lydia will never be happy until she has made a spectacle of herself in some place or other. And we can never expect her to do it with so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances.
But her manner is so unguarded and imprudent.
I think you exaggerate, my dear. Foolish she undoubtedly is, but scarcely out of hand.
She is already a determined little flirt. Oh, Papa, I'm asking this for her own good.
We'll never have any peace at Longbourn if she doesn't go. Colonel Forster's a sensible man, and he will keep her out of any real mischief.
I sincerely hope so.
I will give her my permission right now, so she won't disturb me by asking for it later.
Yes, very lovely.
And, Mr. Collins, what are you doing in the garden?
Miss Charlotte has kindly consented on returning with me. I've been calling on Sir William and Lady Lucas.
I have something very important to tell you, Eliza. I hope it's good news. We've had so much of the other kind.
May I speak to Mr. Bennet?
Papa went out that way a moment ago.
Thank you.
It's nice of you to spend a little time with Mr. Collins, Charlotte. Keeps me in good humour, and I'm more obliged to you than I can say. Why should I not? Mr. Collins and I are engaged to be married. Charlotte, engaged to Mr. Collins. Impossible. Not at all. I'm sorry. I'm sure I wish you every happiness. I'm not unaware, Lizzie, that Mr. Collins asked you first to marry him. Oh, dear Charlotte, you only did it out of duty, I'm sure. I'm not romantic, you know. I asked only for a comfortable home, and I'm convinced that my chance of happiness with Mr. Collins is as good as most people can hope for. Of course. Oh, Charlotte, I sincerely do hope you'll be happy. Will you come and visit me after I'm married? Promise me, Elizabeth. I promise. Thank you. I must hear how your mother takes the news.
Charlotte, how nice to see you. This bonnet is quite past. But Mamma and I are going shopping for some more, and some new gowns. She has invited Jane to come along with us. Do tell them I'll be out in the garden when they come down.
Lydia tells me you're going shopping. I must do something. Oh, Jane, you know how I feel for you. Mamma's determined now that I pay a visit to Aunt Gardner in London. Oh, why don't you? A change would do you a world of good. But Mamma's plan is that I should write to Caroline Bingley from there, and then she and her brother would call on me. How like Mamma. Oh, Lizzie. What shall I do? My heart is broken. Jane. I'll forget him soon, and we'll all be as we were before. You doubt me? Indeed, you have no reason. He may live in my memory, but that is all. Oh, Jane, I don't know what to say to you. I feel as if I've never done you justice or loved you as you deserve. No, no. You wish to think all the world as good as you are. The more I see of the world, the more I'm dissatisfied with it. Now, Charlotte's engagement, it's unaccountable. No. Lizzie, remember that Charlotte is one of a large family but little fortune. She may feel something like regard and esteem for our cousin. I can't bring myself to think so. Mr. Collins is a narrow-minded, pompous, silly man. And Charlotte knows that as well as we do.
Indeed, Mr. Bennet, I think it is very hard to imagine that Charlotte Lucas will ever be mistress of this house.
Lydia's waiting in the garden, Mamma.
Come along, Jane. I shall be forced to make way for Charlotte and live to see her take my place.
My dear, let's not give way to such gloomy thoughts. Let us hope for a better day. Let's flatter ourselves that I may outlive you. So, Lizzie, your sister Jane is crossed in love, I find.
Papa, don't you take anything seriously.
I discovered a long time ago that the only way for a mere man to survive in a household full of women is to find the amusing side of everything.
You're not laughing at Jane.
No, my dear, I am not. But it is a comfort to know that no matter what may befall any of you, you have an affectionate mother who will always make the most of it.
Well, Mariah, here we are.
Does Charlotte really live here?
Yes.
Thank you, Sir William, for allowing me to join you on your trip to Charlotte's house.
My pleasure, my dear.
Sir William, Mariah, Cousin Elizabeth, I am honored to welcome you to my humble abode. My dear sir.
My dear Mr. Collins.
I am deeply going to make a happy welcome to the parsonage, which I would not be in possession to procure if not for the patronage of Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
I am happy to see you, Lizzie, and I you.
Let me show you the house. The staircase, I flatter myself, is eminently suitable for a clergyman in my position, neither being too shallow nor too steep.
As serviceable a staircase as I've ever seen, sir. Now, in St. James Court...
No, it is nothing, of course, to the staircase you see at Rosings. I say staircases because there are several of them, and each in their own way very fine. If you will permit me, Cousin Elizabeth, this will be your bedchamber while you are staying with us. Is it not that I hope you find it comfortable and convenient?
It is a very pleasant room.
Notice the closet there. What do you say to that? Is it not the very essence of practicality and convenience?
Indeed it is, sir.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh herself was kind enough to suggest that these shelves be fitted exactly as you see them there.
Shelves in a closet, happy thought indeed.
Oh, she is kindness itself. Nothing is too small to be beneath her notice, is it not, my dear?
She is a very attentive neighbour.
We dine at Rosings Park twice a week, and we are never allowed to walk home.
Well, that is generosity itself, is it not, Mariah?
Yes, Papa.
Her ladyship's carriage is often ordered for us. I should say carriages, because there are several of them. And Sir William, you expressed a wish to see my garden.
I did.
This way, sir.
Mr. Collins tends the gardens himself and spends a good part of every day in them. What? A king must be beneficial. Oh, indeed, it is. I encourage him to be in his garden as much as possible. And then he has to walk to Rosings nearly every day. So often, is that necessary? Perhaps not, but I confess I encourage him in that as well. Walking is very beneficial exercise. Oh, indeed it is. And when he is in the house, he is mostly in his book room, which affords a good view of the road whenever Lady Catherine's carriage should drive by. And you prefer to sit in this parlour? Yes. So it often happens that a whole day passes in which we have not spent more than a few minutes in each other's company. I see. I find that I can bear the solitude very cheerfully. I find myself quite content with my situation, Lizzie.
Come, we must be off to Rosings. As soon as I told her ladyship of your forthcoming arrival, she insisted that we join her this very evening. There are 32 gardeners and other gardeners, and note the windows there. I have it on good authority that the glazings alone costed in excess of £600.
Oh, 600, really?
Yes, quite. And the ballrooms at Rosings is also just wonderful. Is it not, yet?
Oh yes, getting married there was one of the happiest days of my life. I have a question. Yes, Mariah? Is Lady Catherine's house haunted? No, don't be silly.
Oh, children's imagination. Unfortunately, no, it is not. But her garden is actually something that I truly enjoy walking in. You have walked in it too, my dear, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yes, I'm so pleased that you have found a hobby that you're interested in, dear.
Yes, quite. Oh, my cousin Elizabeth, don't fret yourself upon your appearance. Just because you are simply dressed, she does not require that elegance of dress in us, which becomes her and her daughter. She prefers that the preservation of rank is preserved.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. That is a great compliment.
Lady Catherine, may I present Sir William Lucas?
It's my pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Do you call on St. James quite often?
And who are these two?
This is my daughter, Mariah, ma'am.
And my cousin, Miss Elizabeth Bennet of Longbourn.
An apothecary will serve your needs quite adequately, and make sure it be no one but Nicholson, Mrs. Collins. I shall be extremely angry if I hear you've gone elsewhere.
I assure you, Lady Catherine, I have no intention to.
Yes, no intention at
Well.
all.
Your friend is quite the genteel, pretty sort of girl. Her father's estate is entailed upon Mr. Collins, I understand.
Yes, ma'am, and I would never
Do you have
intentionally...
any brothers or sisters, Miss Bennet?
Yes, your ladyship. I'm second eldest of 5 sisters.
Are any of your younger sisters out?
Yes, ma'am, all of them.
All? Was all 5 out at once? The younger ones out before the older are married? Your younger sisters must be very young.
The youngest is not yet 16.
Well,
perhaps she is very young to be much in company, but really, ma'am, it would be very hard upon my younger sisters to miss their share of society's amusements, simply because their elder sisters have not had the good fortune or inclination to marry early. Wouldn't you agree so well,
Very well.
Upon my word, share your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age?
But Ringo's sister's grown up. Your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it.
You cannot be more than 20, Miss Bennet. Therefore, there's no need to conceal your age.
I am not 21.
Mrs. Collins, did I tell you of Lady Betcock's calling on me yesterday to thank me for sending her Miss Pope? Lady Catherine, said she, you have given me a treasure. Yes.
I see you for pianoforte.
Yes, your perception is acute.
May I impose upon you to allow me to play?
Do you play? Very well then, yes, do pray. It is available to you. Let's hear it.
Yes, let's hear.
You will never play really well, Miss Bennet, unless you practice more. You may come to Rosings as often as you like and play on the pianoforte in Mrs. Jenkins's room. She'll be nobody's way in that part of the house.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are few people in England, I suppose, that have more true enjoyment in music than myself. Or better taste.
Yes, Mamma.
Oh, and if I had learnt, I should be a true proficient. And so would Anne.
Yes, Mamma.
Quite right.
Oh, my nephews, Mr. Darcy and Colonel Fitzwilliam. Mr. Darcy, you already know everyone from your time at Longbourn, I believe. This is my brother, the Earl's son, Colonel Fitzwilliam. Colonel Fitzwilliam is Sir Lucas and his daughter Maria of Longbourn. And at the pianoforte, Miss Bennet, cousin to Mr. Collins.
Do you mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in all your state to hear me? What work you know? My courage rises at your every attempt to intimidate me.
I know you find great enjoyment in professing opinions which are not your own.
Your cousin would teach you not to believe a word I say, Colonel Fitzwilliam. Is that not ungenerous of Mr. Darcy?
It is indeed, Darcy.
Impolitic, too. For it provokes me to say something in his behaviour in Hartford shows may shock his relations.
I am not afraid of you.
What have you to accuse him of? I should dearly like to know how he behaves among strangers.
First time of my ever seeing Mr. Darcy was at a ball where he danced only 4 dances, those gentlemen were scarce, and more than one young lady was in want of a partner. I'm sorry to pain you. So it was.
I can well believe it.
I fear I am not qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
Should we ask him why? Why a man of sense and education brought up so high in the world should be ill-qualified to recommend himself to strangers?
I have not that talent which some possess in conversing easily with strangers.
Nor do my fingers move over this instrument in the masterly manner that I might wish them to, but then I've always supposed it to be my own fault because I will not take the trouble of practicing.
You are perfectly right. You have employed your time much better. No one admitted to the privilege of hearing you could think anything wanting. We, neither of us, perform to strangers.
What are you talking about? What are you telling Miss Bennet? I must have my share in the conversation.
I'm so sorry, but I seem to have developed a headache. If I may be allowed to return to my room.
Don't bother. Fresh air might do me good. No, I'm fully aware that Lydia stole one of your bonnets earlier. Yes, I would quite like it
My
back.
dear Mrs. Collins, my dear cousin Elizabeth, we have been now shaped to the greatest honour. Mr. Darcy is coming to call on the parsonage.
When, my dear?
Even now, he is hard pressed upon my heels. Make haste, make haste.
I think this must be due to you, Lizzie. Mr. Darcy would never come to wait upon me. I can't think why, for I know he dislikes me as much as I do him.
Oh, he has arrived.
Good day, Mr. Collins. I was asked by my aunt to deliver a message to you as I departed. She desires yours and Mrs. Collins' immediate presence.
Oh, my dear, we must make haste, make haste.
I beg your pardon, I would not wish to intrude upon your privacy.
I was just writing a letter to my sister, that is all.
Ah.
Mr. Bingley and his sister were well, I hope, when you left London.
Perfectly so, I thank you.
I understand Mr. Bingley has a much idea of ever returning to Netherfield.
It is probable that he may spend very little time there in the future.
If he means to be there but little, it might be better for the neighbourhood that should give the place up entirely.
I should not be surprised if he were to give it up, as soon as any eligible purchase offers. It seems a very comfortable house. Lady Catherine, I believe, did a great deal to it when Mr. Collins first came to Hunsford.
Indeed she did. She could not have bestowed her kindness on a more grateful recipient.
Mr. Collins appears extremely fortunate in his choice of wife.
Yes. Though, seen in a prudential light, it is a good match for her as well.
It must be very agreeable for her to be settled within so easy a distance of a family.
Easy a distance, do you call it? It's nearly 50 miles.
What is 50 miles of good road? Yes, I call it a very easy distance.
Near and far are relative terms. I suppose it is possible for a woman to be settled too near her family.
Yes, exactly. You would not wish to be always near Longbourn, I think. I shall trespass on your time no longer. Please convey my regards to Mrs. Collins and her sister. Oh, no, please, don't trouble yourself. In vain I have struggled, it will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. In declaring myself thus, I am fully aware that I will be going expressly against the wishes of my family, my friends, and I hardly need add my unfettered judgment. The relative situation of our families is such that any alliance between us must be regarded as a highly reprehensible connection. Indeed, as a rational man, I cannot but regard it as such myself. But it cannot be helped. Almost from the earliest moments of our acquaintance, I have come to feel for you a passionate admiration and regard, which, despite all my struggles, has overcome every rational objection, and I beg you, most fervently, to relieve my suffering and consent to be my wife.
In cases such as these, I believe it is the established mode to express a sense of gratitude. But I cannot. I've never desired your good opinion, and you've bestowed it most unwillingly. I'm sorry to have caused pain to anyone, but it was unconsciously done, and I trust it will be of short duration.
And this is all the reply I'm to expect. You might wonder why, with so little effort at civility, I am rejected.
And I might wonder why it was so evident a desire to offend and insult me. You chose to tell me that you liked me against your will, against your reason, and even against your character. Was that not some excuse for incivility if I was uncivil? I have every reason in the world to think ill of you. Do you think anything could tempt me to marry the man who has been the means of ruining the happiness of a most beloved sister? Can you deny that you have done it?
I have no wish to deny it. I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister, and I rejoice in my success. Towards him I am kinder than towards myself.
But it is not merely this affair on which my dislike is founded. Long before it had taken place, your character was made clear enough in an account given to me by Mr. Wickham. How can you defend yourself on that subject?
And you take an eager interest in that gentleman's concerns?
Who then knows what his misfortunes if man could help but feel an interest in them?
His misfortunes. Yes, his misfortunes would be great indeed.
And of your infliction. You reduced him to his present state of poverty, and yet still treat the mention of him with contempt and ridicule.
And this is your opinion of me? My faults by this calculation are heavy indeed. But perhaps these offences might have been overlooked. Had not your pride been hurt by the honest confession of the scruples which had long prevented my forming any serious design on you? Had I concealed my struggles and flattered you? Disguise of every sort is my abhorrence. Nor am I ashamed of the feelings I related. They were natural and just. Did you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your connections? To congratulate myself on the help of relations whose condition in life is so decidedly below my own?
You're mistaken, Mr. Darcy. Your mode of declaration merely spares me any concern I might have felt in refusing you had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner. From the very beginning, sir, your manners impressed me with the fullest belief of your arrogance, your conceit, and your selfish disdain for the feelings of others. You could not have made the offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it. I had not known you more than a month before I knew that you were the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed upon to marry.
Is it quite enough, madam? I perfectly comprehend your feelings. And now I'm willing to be ashamed of what my own have been. Please forgive me for having taken up your time. Accept my best wishes for your health and happiness.
This post has just arrived for you, Lizzie. Thank you, Charlotte. To Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Not alarmed about upon receiving this letter. That it
contain any repetition of those sentiments or renewal of those offers which were so disgusting to you. But I must be allowed to defend myself against the charges laid at my door. In particular, those relating to Mr. Wickham, which, if true, would indeed be grievous, but are wholly without foundation, and which I can only refute by laying before you his connection with my family. Mr. Wickham is the son of a very respectable man, who had the management of our family estates, and my own father was fond of him, and held him in high esteem. We played together as boys. After his father's early death, my father supported him at school, and afterwards at Cambridge, and hoped he would make the church his profession. But by then, George Wickham's habits were as dissolute as his manners were engaging. My own excellent father died 5 years ago, and his attachment to Mr. Wickham was, to the last, so steady that he desired that a valuable family living might be his as soon as it was vacant. Mr. Wickham declined any interest in the church as a career, but requested and was granted the sum of £3,000 instead of the living. He expressed an intention of studying the law. I wished, rather than believed him, to be sincere.
Thank you. I am most exceedingly obliged.
All connection between us seemed now dissolved.
Georgiana.
Being now free from all restraint. His life was one of idleness and dissipation. How he lived I know not, but last summer our paths crossed again, under the most painful circumstances, which I myself would wish to forget. My sister Georgiana, who was more than 10 years my junior, was left to the guardianship of Colonel Fitzwilliam and myself. About a year ago she was taken from school to Ramsgate, and placed in the care of a Mrs. Young, in whose character we were most unhappily deceived. And thither also went Mr. Wickham, undoubtedly by design. She was persuaded to believe herself in love, and to consent to an elopement. She was then but 15 years old. A day or two before the intended elopement, I joined them unexpectedly.
Able to support the idea of a grieving brother whom she looked up to, almost as a father, she acknowledged the whole plan to me at once. may imagine what I felt and how I acted. Mr. Wickham left the place immediately. Mr. Wickham relinquished his object, which was, of course, my sister's fortune, £30,000. A secondary motive must have been to revenge himself on me. Had he succeeded, his revenge would have been complete, indeed. This, madam, is a faithful narrative of all my dealings with Mr. Wickham, and for its truth, I can appeal to the testimony of Colonel Fitzwilliam, who knows every particular of these transactions.
I know not under what form of falsehood Mr. Wickham imposed himself on you, but I hope you will acquit me of cruelty towards him. The other charge levelled at me is that, regardless of the sentiments of either party, I detached Mr. Bingley from your sister. I have no wish to deny this, nor can I blame myself for any of my actions in this matter.
Oh!
I had not long been in Hertfordshire before I saw that Bingley admired your sister, but it was not until the dance at Netherfield that I suspected serious attachment. His partiality was clear, but though she received his attentions with pleasure, I did not detect any symptoms of peculiar regard. The serenity of her countenance convinced me that her heart was not likely to be easily touched.
Insufferable presumption.
I do not believe her to be indifferent because I wished it. I believed it on impartial conviction.
Oh, very impartial.
As to my objections to the marriage, the situation of your family, though objectionable, was nothing in comparison with the total want of propriety so frequently betrayed by your mother, your younger sisters, and even occasionally your father. My friend left Netherfield for London the following day. There I engaged in the office of pointing out to him the certain evils of his choice of your sister as a prospective bride. It was not difficult to convince him of your sister's indifference to him. I cannot blame myself for having done thus much.
For destroying all her hope of happiness, as I'm sure you do not blame yourself, hateful man.
There is but one part of my conduct in the affair in which I do not reflect with satisfaction.
Oh, really? Astonish me.
That is, that I concealed from him your sister's being in town. Perhaps this concealment was beneath me. It is done, however, and it was done for the best. On this subject I have nothing more to say, and no other apology to offer.
Yes. Indeed, your pride never lets you apologize. God! What's wrong? I cannot stand to be in the presence of this man any longer. I must return to Longbourn immediately.
Why doesn't she come? It seems an age since Lizzie went to Charlotte's. 6 whole weeks. Imagine having to listen to Mr. Collins that long. In my opinion, Mr. Collins has some very erudite thoughts.
Mamma will never quite forgive Lizzie for not marrying him.
Marriage is not the only end in life.
But it's the best beginning I can think of. Oh, I wish I were in Brighton with Lydia.
Lydia's turned out to be a silly, empty-headed flirt.
But what a time she must be having. Mr. Wickham is escorting her to all the balls, and all I ever do is sit at home and wait for people to come home.
Oh, my dear Jane, you must rest on a settee for a little bit. Do not exert yourself.
Ma, I am not an invalid.
There's sort of spot of colour in your cheeks since you got back from London. I don't know what your Aunt Gardner was thinking of, letting you get so run down.
Aunt Gardner was very kind, and I feel perfectly fit. Really, I do.
Men, as some wise person once observed, are at the bottom of our troubles. What, did he say women?
Oh, man, come yet, Kitty. It's been quite some time since I had a note from Lydia.
Lydia's doing quite well, according to my last letter. Oh, look, here comes Papa's carriage now.
I will get no more reading done this afternoon.
No doubt. Your father will have heard all the news before we even get a whisper of it.
Oh, there can't be much news after a trip to Mr. and Mrs. Collins.
Oh, dear Mamma.
Oh, Lizzie.
And dear Jane, and Kitty, and Mary. What it is to be home again.
I'm so glad you've come back, Lizzie.
Oh, my dear, so are we all. Let's have all the news.
How does Charlotte look? Does she seem happy?
Let me get my breath first.
Well, the presence of a mere man may not still the clatter of female tongues, but I think you'll talk more freely without me.
Jane, you're looking pale. It's nothing. I had a most delightful time in London. Did Mr. Bingley call to see you? He was very busy. His sister Caroline called.
Once. 1 15-minute call.
But it's your news that we are anxious to hear.
Did you see any good-looking men to flirt with?
Charlotte is very happy, and they live well. Quite comfortably.
I only hope it will last. What sort of table do they keep? No doubt Charlotte is an excellent manager.
She is.
I suppose they often talk of having Longbourn when your father is gone.
That is a subject they could have hardly mentioned before me.
Need we go into that again, Mamma?
Do not say another word. Besides, Jane, you've taxed you long enough. It's time you get some sun.
I much prefer to remain in here and talk with Lizzie.
Nonsense, we must get some colour in your cheeks.
You're quite right, Mamma.
Kitty, go with Mary and see if you can get some studying done in your room. I shall see to Jane's chair.
Yes, Mamma.
Lizzie, tell me everything. Did you see Mr. Darcy?
I saw him very often at Lady Catherine's.
Did he make any reference to that strange proposal you wrote of?
None at all. Though he did put himself out to be more agreeable.
Oh. Lizzie, do you really think you did right?
You don't blame me for accusing him?
Oh, no. But to be thwarted in love is a terrible thing.
Dear Jane, always thinking of other people. Tell me about your trip to London.
Caroline called only once. I confess I've been entirely deceived in her regard for me.
I suspected as much.
She mentioned that Mr. Bingley's partial to Miss Darcy and that they expected the announcement any day.
It can't be true. He loves you, Jane, I'm sure of it.
I'm quite resigned to it now. At least I try to be. But I still love him, Lizzie.
Jane.
I can't help it.
Jane.
I have moved your chair into the sun and has fixed it with pillows. Come along now, Jane.
Yes, Mamma.
Oh, get that light woollen shawl for your shoulders. There might be a little draught.
I left it upstairs.
Well, Lizzie will get it for you.
Mamma, I will not be treated as an invalid.
Well, Lizzie, what do you think of this sad business of Jane's?
I'm worried about her health.
I, for one, am determined never to speak of Mr. Bingley to anyone again. He's the most undeserving young man, and I don't suppose there's a chance in the world of ever having him now.
I think not.
Oh, poor Jane will die of a broken heart. Then he will be sorry for what he has done.
Lady Lucas, madam.
Very well, show her in, Hill. She has come to boast of Charlotte's marriage again.
She probably wants to know Charlotte as well.
Every time she visits, I can see her looking the place over, just waiting for Mr. Bennet to die so Charlotte can move in. Good afternoon, Lady Lucas.
It's good to see you home again, Elizabeth. How did you leave my dear Charlotte and her good husband?
In the best of health. They send their kindest regards.
It is such a comfort having a daughter well married. You can't know how happy I am.
What is keeping Jane?
What a pity young Mr. Bingley doesn't return. Lydia's enjoying herself at Brighton, I trust?
Indeed, yes.
How nice to see you, Lady Lucas.
Jane, you're looking so pale.
No, it is nothing. A slight indisposition.
I hope Lydia is not seeing too much of Mr. Wickham at Brighton. I hear he left gaming debts of considerable amount behind him in Meryton.
Gaming debts.
His pleasant countenance has deceived a great many people. They say he's in debt to every tradesman in the place.
And I have no idea of it.
Neither have I. People in Meryton are all turned against him now, though there was a time when they say Mr. Wickham was ill-used by Mr. Darcy.
Do you mean He has told it generally that Mr. Darcy cheated him out of his inheritance.
My dear, everyone knows it about it.
But I thought... So not for the world would he injure Mr. Darcy's reputation.
It seems that was exactly the method that he used to ruin it.
Oh, Lizzie, Wickham has deceived us.
I have it on good authority that Mr. Darcy denied him a living in the church only because of his unreliable character.
I can scarcely believe it.
Oh, I assure you, it is the truth. Thank you for your kind messages from Charlotte. Walk with me to my carriage, Mrs. Bennet. A little fresh air will do you good.
Oh, yes, of course. My hands are all aflutter.
Jane, how could I have accused Mr. Darcy of injustice to Mr. Wickham when I didn't know the facts?
We were so wrong about him, Lizzie. I'm ashamed.
I, who prided myself on being such a clever judge of character.
Lizzie, if I didn't know that you dislike him so much, I would almost say that you are in love with him.
In love with Mr. Darcy? Never.
It is possible to deceive one's heart for a little while.
He separated Mr. Bingley from you. That I will never forgive him.
Mamma will be upset if I don't go outside. I didn't mean to offend you, Lizzie. You can never do that, dear Jane.
Did you notice how Lady Lucas was looking at the settee? No doubt she advises Charlotte to recover it.
You're quite mistaken, Mamma. I'd better prepare for my holiday with Uncle and Aunt Gardiner. We leave tomorrow, and they say we are to tour Derbyshire.
How good it is to have you touring with us, Lizzie.
I'm grateful you and Uncle Gardiner invited me to join you. Derbyshire has many beauties, has it not?
Indeed. To me, Derbyshire is the best of all counties. You will judge whether or not Chatsworth is the equal of Blenheim. And the southern counties have nothing on the wild and untamed beauty of the peaks.
Nature and culture in harmony, you see, Lizzie. Wildness and artifice, and all in the one perfect county.
Well, I was born and I grew up here, so I should never disagree with that.
Where exactly?
At London, a little town of no consequence to anyone except those fortunate enough to have lived in it. I think it the dearest place in the world. It has one further claim on your interest. It is but 5 miles from Pemberley. Owes much of its prosperity to that great estate.
So near.
Not that I or any of my acquaintance ever had the privilege of intimacy with that family. We moved in very different circles, but the grounds are very fine.
Is the family here for the summer?
I inquired at the inn. They informed me that the family was most assuredly in London for the summer. Well, shall we visit Pemberley?
Perhaps we might visit Pemberley after all.
I think we've seen woods and groves enough to satisfy even your enthusiasm for them, Lizzie.
Indeed.
I think one would be willing to put up with a great deal to be mistress of Pemberley.
The mistress of Pemberley will have to put up with a great deal from what I hear.
She's not likely to be anyone we know. How do you like the house, Lizzie?
Very well. Yes, I like it very well, indeed.
Perhaps the beauty of the house renders its owner a little less repulsive, Lizzie.
Yes, perhaps. Perhaps a very little.
Yeah. Shall we apply to the housekeeper to see inside the place?
Mr. Darcy!
Miss Bennet,
the housekeeper assured us she would not be back until tomorrow. We were not ever presumed.
I returned early. Excuse me, your parents are in good health?
Yes, sir, they're very well, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. How long have you been in this part of the country?
But 2 weeks, sir.
And where are you staying?
At the inn in Lambton.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, I'm just driving myself, and your parents are in good health? And all your sisters?
Yes, we are. All of us are, well...
Excuse me.
The man himself, I presume.
We must leave here at once.
Well, of course, if you wish.
How could we have come
Missy.
here? What must he think of me?
Was he displeased? What did he say?
Nothing of any consequence. He inquired after my parents.
We must see Pemberley.
No.
Miss Bennet, please allow me to apologize for not receiving you properly just now. You're not leaving.
I think we must, yes.
I hope you're not displeased with Pemberley.
Oh, not at all.
Then you approve of it.
Very much. Though there are few, I think, who not approve.
But your good opinion is rarely bestowed, therefore more worth the honor.
Thank you.
Would you do me the honor of introducing me to your friends?
Oh, certainly. Mr. and Mrs. Edward Gardner, Mr. Darcy. Mrs. Gardner is my aunt. Jane stayed at the house in Cheapside.
Delighted to make your acquaintance, madam. Delighted, sir. You're staying in Lambton, I hear.
Oh, yes, I grew up there as a girl.
Delightful village. I remember running from Pemberley to Lambton as a boy almost every day in the horse chestnut season. There was one very fine tree there, I remember.
On the green by the
The
smithy.
very one. Mr. Gardner, do you care for fishing?
Indeed, I do, and I have the chance of it.
If you have time, sir, you must come fishing my trout stream. I could provide you with rods and tackle, show you the best spots. Let us walk down now. There's a spot down there we used to tickle them out.
Is this the proud Darcy you told us of? He's always in friendliness, no false dignity at all.
Indeed he is. I cannot think what must have affected this change.
Can you not?
Miss Bennet? Do you... Oh, pray, continue.
Going to say again, sir, how very unexpected your arrival was. Had we known you would be here, we would not have dreamt of evading your privacy.
I beg you, do not make yourself uneasy. I had planned it so myself, but I found I had business with my steward, and so rode on ahead of the rest of the party without informing anyone. They will join me tomorrow, and among them are those who claim an acquaintance with you. It's Mr. Bingley and his sister.
Ah.
There's the other person in the party who more particularly wishes to know you. Will you allow me to, do we ask too much to introduce my sister to you during your stay at Lambton?
I should be happy to make her acquaintance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope we shall meet again very soon. Good day, Mrs. Gardner. Mr. Gardner. Good day, Miss Bennet.
Oh, there you are, Lizzie. I trust your holiday with your mother's sister was refreshing.
Oh, yes, she's been back for hours, Mr. Bennet. Hey, will you fry yourself out of your study?
Before your nerves give way over trifles, madam, I have news of real import. An express from Colonel Forster in Brighton.
About Lydia?
She has gone off with Mr. Wickham.
Oh, Lydia married! How happy I am!
Wait, my dear. Although it is evident from the note Lydia left that she expected to be married at once. From what Colonel Forster has been able to find out, no marriage has taken place.
Oh, Mamma. What is it? Lydia has run off with Mr. Wickham, but it seems he has no intention of marrying her.
Oh, poor Lydia. And poor Mamma.
Colonel Forster believes they were headed for London. I shall start for there at once. Your Uncle Gardner may be able to help me trace them.
Oh, but Miss Wickham!
Don't cry, Mamma, please.
Oh, I think the boss has given up.
Oh, no one could watch Lydia all the time.
No, here's Mr. Bennet going off, and he will find Mr. Wickham, and then he will be killed, and we will be turned out. All because you did not marry Mr.
Please, Mamma.
Don't. You must lie down in your room.
God,
is here to see you.
Mr. Darcy, show him in.
Mr. Darcy.
Miss Elizabeth?
How do you do, Mr. Darcy? Oh, I'm surprised to see you.
You will not also be a little happy to see me, Miss Elizabeth?
Happy? Mr. Darcy, I find it very hard to be happy.
What is the matter, Miss Elizabeth?
Mr. Darcy.
Shall I get you a glass of wine?
Please, there is nothing the matter. I'm only distressed by some dreadful news.
Try to calm yourself. I was riding back to London after my visit with Lady Catherine. How fortunate it is I stopped in here.
Is it?
If you will let me be of some service to you.
Nothing can be done for us now. My older sister has thrown herself into the power of Mr. Wickham. We know him too well to doubt the rest.
Wickham?
She has no money, no connections, nothing that could tempt him to marry her.
Now do you know his true character?
Yes. Oh, Mr. Darcy, how we have wronged you in regard to him.
I am grieved. Shocked. But is it certain? Absolutely certain?
Yes.
And what has been done to recover her?
My father has gone to London, but I know very well that nothing can be done. We are ruined.
Control your tears, please, Miss Elizabeth.
Such humiliation! No one will speak to us again.
Don't give up all hope, Miss Elizabeth. I must ask you to excuse me.
You're going?
To London, immediately.
Mr. Darcy, will you ever forgive me for thinking ill of you?
I will try.
Mr. Darcy.
Is your mother any better this morning?
Only a little. She declares over and over again that her heart is broken.
I blame myself for this, but I could find no trace of Lydia or Wickham in London.
Papa, you mustn't think this would be your fault.
No, Lizzie, no. For once in my life, let me feel that I am to blame. I should have listened to your advice and never let Lydia go to Brighton.
It's too late for that now.
Jane has persuaded Mamma to come downstairs for a little while.
Is she dressing?
Yes, although she declares she is far too weak to stand.
Your mother gives such elegance to misfortune. Next time, I may do the same. Perhaps when Kitty runs away.
Oh, Papa, I wouldn't run away. And if I were to go to Brighton, I would behave much better than Lydia.
You go to Brighton? No, Kitty. I have at least learned to be cautious, and you will feel the effects of it. Well, now, don't be unhappy. Don't be unhappy. If you're a good girl for the next 10 years, I'll take you to the theater at the end of them.
Oh, don't hurry.
What a dreadful daytime evening! Oh, the trembling, fluttering!
You must try to think of something else.
Oh, the spasms in my sides, pains in my head, and beatings in my heart, and I cannot rest night or day.
Kitties and tears.
We shall all float away if there are any more tears shed.
This is a most unfortunate affair. It'll probably be much talked of. We must stem the tide of malice and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation.
Now, Mamma.
Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we must not shrink from the useful lessons. The loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable.
Perhaps you should get some fresh air.
A woman's reputation is no less brittle than beautiful.
And please do try to keep quiet.
She cannot be too loud in her behavior towards the undesirable sex.
Would you care for a cup of tea, Mamma?
Oh, tea, when my heart is broken. Oh, to think that your father would return without finding a trace of them.
We must hope for the best.
Oh, is to find Wickham now and make him marry her. Oh, please do tell cook to make the tea strong with plenty of sugar.
I have already told her, Mamma.
Dear Jane.
The tea's nice and hot, madam, and it should do some good.
Oh, it will take more than tea to comfort me now.
What is it, Hill?
I just thought you might like to know that Netherfield is occupied again.
What?
Well, so the housekeeper informed me. Mr. Bingley is expected back soon.
Mr. Bingley is returning. Did you hear that, Jane? No, not that we care about it. He's nothing to us. And I'm sure I never want to see him again.
Mamma, your tea is getting cold.
However, he's welcome to return to Netherfield and who knows what may happen.
Perhaps the tea isn't sweet enough. Shall I ring for Hill?
Of course, we determined long ago never to talk about him again. It's quite certain he is returning.
Surely Mr. Bingley can return to his house without all this speculation.
Oh, yeah. As soon as he arrives, your father must wait on him.
Papa shall do nothing of the kind.
Shall we not leave the initiative to Mr. Bingley?
What ungrateful daughters I have! What ever a poor mother will put upon! All of this has been too much for my poor strength.
I'm sorry to distress you, Mamma, but I will not allow myself to be forced upon Mr. Bingley again. If he wants my society, let him seek it.
Shall I see you to your room?
Don't bother. I must bear all my sufferings alone.
I assure you, Lizzie, this news does not affect me with either pleasure or pain.
I'm sorry that he comes at all.
I can hardly bear to hear him perpetually talked about. Mamma means well, but she doesn't know. No one can know.
Dear Jane, I wish I could see some happiness for both of us.
Why, Lizzie, what's wrong?
I find I can't get him out of my mind for even a moment.
Mr. Darcy?
I know he no longer cares for me. I'm not sure whether I love him or hate him more.
Oh, Lizzie, how unfortunate we all seem to be.
Jane, Lizzie, congratulate me. I'm married.
Lydia! Oh, Lydia!
Allow me to present Mrs. Wickham.
Mama, Papa, everybody come quick, here I am.
We didn't know Papa went to London, but...
Not to be expected he could find us. I'm married, Mama. Oh!
Your dutiful son-in-law, madam. And yours too, sir.
Dear Lydia. Oh, my dear Wickham.
We were married just a short time ago.
Oh, your wedding clothes. We must hear about them directly. And dear, you must decide how much you will give her at once.
Good gracious. When I went away, I had no more idea of being married before I came back again. Though I thought it would be very good fun if I was.
I'm glad you are quite happy with the situation. Wickham, I would like a word with you.
Yes, sir.
So do the people hereabouts know I'm married?
How can they when we ourselves just found out?
Thought they may not. We passed Lady Lucas's carriage on the way here, and I was determined she should know it. So I took off my glove and let my hand rest on the side of our carriage so that she might see my ring.
Lydia, you didn't.
And then I bowed and smiled like anything.
How could you?
Oh, Lydia, your bonnet is the prettiest I've ever seen.
The colour's far too gay.
Oh, I must tell Hill to prepare the south chamber for our bride and groom.
I'll go too. I can't wait to see the look on Hill's face.
Oh, and Mary, come along. I might
tell Mamma all about my wedding.
I hope it passed off well.
Aren't you curious to know how it was managed?
No.
Law, you're both so strange. But I must tell you how it went off. My uncle and aunt and I went together to the church, and Mr. Wickham and Mr. Darcy met us there.
Mr. Darcy?
Well, yes, he was the one who found us. Law, was I surprised when he walked in.
Mr. Darcy found you.
Good gracious, they warned me not to say a thing about it. Oh, but there, the cat's out of the bag, so I might as well go on.
What else did Mr. Darcy do?
Oh, you know, he settled dear Wickham's debts here and there, a few £1,000 or so. And then he very kindly settled £1,000 on me and purchased a commission for my dear Wickham in Newcastle.
Newcastle. You will be living quite far from us.
Oh, yes. But you must all come and visit me, and I will plan balls for you all. I must talk to Mamma about it at once.
But Mr. Darcy should have done all this for our family. The humiliation is almost more than I can bear.
He has done it for you, Lizzie.
I can't let myself believe that.
Oh, you must.
I'm humble, but I'm proud of him.
I'm afraid I interrupt sisterly confidences.
You do.
But it does not follow that the interruption must be unwelcome.
I should be sorry, indeed, if it were. We were always good friends, Miss Elizabeth. Now we are better.
I understand you saw something of Mr. Darcy when you were in town.
I did. He is in good health and very busy.
No doubt. Preparing for his marriage with Miss Anne de Bourgh.
His Aunt Catherine has her heart set on announcing that engagement.
I'm sure I wish him every happiness.
Lizzie, what Wickham has done in the past is over. Let us try to forget it.
Now, Mary, I want you to sit down and write everything as I tell you.
Yes, Mamma.
We must have calico.
I wish I were ordering my wedding clothes.
And muslin. And camera.
Mr. Charles Bingley, madam.
Oh, gracious. Well, shall we get in, Hill?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, what a pity you're not wearing a new frock, Jane, but you are looking well. Stop fronting Kitty and greet her with a smile. Mary, Lizzie, you're very first in manners.
Mr. Bingley.
I hope you have no objections, madam, to this early call.
Oh, objections, no, none at all, my dear Mr. Bingley. Won't you be seated?
Thank you.
It has been some time since you went away.
Yes, a very long time.
I was beginning to think that you would not come back.
Did you have a pleasant trip from London?
Very pleasant, thank you.
Well, so much has happened since you've been away. Charlotte Lucas is married and settled, and my youngest, Lydia.
Allow me to offer my congratulations to them both.
Well, thank you. It is a delightful thing to have a daughter well married. You must take family dinner with us soon, Mr. Bingley.
I shall be pleased.
I shall finish my notes upstairs, Mamma.
Oh, yes, my love.
What is the matter, Mamma?
Come, my love, I wish to speak with you.
But, Mamma...
Oh, and you, Lizzie, I also wish to speak with you.
Isn't necessary, Mamma?
Most necessary. Excuse us, Mr. Bingley.
Actually, I was about to ask for the honor of Miss Jane's company for a stroll in the garden.
Oh, yes, of course, Jane.
Yes, Mamma.
wanted to get them alone, but this is so much better. He's just as formidable as ever.
Mama, I warn you about jumping to conclusions again.
Mark my word, we shall have her Netherfield yet.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh, madam.
Mercy me! Lady Catherine! I can't believe it.
Show her in here.
She must be here to see you, Lizzie.
That's strange. We don't really dislike each other.
Lady Catherine.
I hope you are well, Miss Bennet. This lady, I suppose, is your mother.
She is.
And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters.
Oh yes, this is my next to youngest. My youngest is lately married, and my eldest is walking the grounds with a gentleman who I see. I believe will soon be part of our family.
Miss Bennet, I desire to speak to you alone.
Very well, Lady Catherine.
Of course, if there's anything I can do to...
Alone!
Oh, yes. Of course, come along now, Kizzy.
You understand, of course, why I have come here.
I have no idea of it.
However insincere you may choose to be, I shall be quite frank. A report of a most alarming nature has reached me.
And what has it to do with me?
It seems that you are scheming to marry my nephew, Mr. Darcy.
Oh.
Of course that I know it is a scandalous falsehood. Such an alliance is impossible.
If you believed it to be impossible, I wonder that you took the trouble of coming so far.
I insist that you deny the report at once.
Indeed.
Do you deny it? Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
Your ladyship has just declared it to be impossible.
I am Mr. Darcy's nearest relative, and what concerns him deeply concerns me.
But you are no relative of mine, and have no right to bully me into answering your questions.
Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter.
Oh, if he is so, you should have no reason to suppose he will ask me to marry him.
Impossible, girl! Think twice before marrying one so far above you. My daughter has family, connections, a fortune. You have nothing. Such a marriage would be a disgrace.
Mr. Darcy is a gentleman. I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal.
Tell me once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
Do you promise me never to enter into such an engagement?
I will make no such promise.
Is that your final resolve? Very well. I shall know how to act. Do not imagine, Miss Bennet, that your ambitions in regard to Mr. Darcy will ever be gratified.
Aunt Catherine, since Miss Elizabeth is too polite to ask you to leave her house, I must ask you to go.
My dear Darcy, if you'd only heard the pretensions
At
of
once.
I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attentions.
Oh, Mr. Darcy, that you should have come upon such a scene.
It gives me courage to hope there may still be a chance for me. Is there, Miss Elizabeth?
You've done so much for me, for my family. Lydia told me.
I asked her not to mention it. In a way, I'm to blame for not having told you Wickham's true character.
Well, I wouldn't let you tell me anything. It was you who brought Mr. Bingley back here, wasn't it?
I was wrong to take him away. Believe me, I hadn't realized the strength of Jane's attachment for him, and of his for her.
My behaviour to you has been unpardonable from the very beginning, and you will appear to tell me with kindness.
'Tis my behaviour that was unpardonable. My abominable pride.
And my abominable prejudice. When I think of the things I said to you, I despise myself.
Am I still the last man in the world whom you could ever be prevailed upon to marry, Miss Elizabeth?
How must you hate me?
Is there no possible way in which I can tempt you to accept me?
Please don't. I am wretched.
Beautifully wretched. Elizabeth, I love you.
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
Will you do me the great honour of becoming my wife?
Yes. My father, if you wish to ask him, is in the library.
I shall ask him at once.
Lizzie, my dear, I'm so happy.
Can I guess the reason?
Miss Jane has promised to become my wife.
You will find Papa in the library. Mamma, I'm going to marry Mr. Bingley.
Oh, my dear Jane, I'm sure sleep a wink. He's the handsomest young man I've ever seen. Oh, and you've always been my favourite daughter.
He believed I was indifferent to him. That's why he quit Netherfield so suddenly.
That will teach you not to be so humble, Jane.
Oh, it's far too much. Why isn't everybody as happy?
My dear, your future sons-in-law.
Mr. Darcy, too?
Yes, Mamma. I've loved him for a long time.
Lizzie, dear.
Oh, gracious Lord, bless me! Oh, my! Oh, Mr. Darcy! Oh, my sweet Lizzie! My favourite daughter!
Thank you for your congratulations, Mamma.
Will you excuse us for a stroll in the garden?
Oh, yes, of course we will, won't we, Mr. Bennet?
I think we had better.
Think of it! I have 3 sons-in-law!
Well, if any young men come for Mary or Kitty, send them in. I am quite at leisure.
Mr. Bingley with 4,000 to 5,000 a year. Oh, my dear sweet